Since it's the end of the day too, I thought, why don't we just introduce a bit of music since this is a beautiful big hall? So I'll start. I was going to play this at the end, but I'll start with the first piece to open us up with a bit of music. And here we go. It will all become clearer as we go along. All right, so what you witnessed there is a system for making music. That was the product that I recently worked on designing for a client called Rolly. And so who am I? I'm a CEO of a company called Integral. Throughout my life, I've worked for so many different clients, I can't really remember them anymore. But it's included big corporations such as HSBC and Bupa, Legal & General, Amex, Innovation Labs. And I started as a full-stack developer. So I'm kind of like, nowadays I describe myself as a Russian doll kind of person. So I started as a full-stack developer, then moved to UI development, then UX design, like a regular UX designer, then a kind of UX design strategist, then service designer, then service design strategy. And nowadays I find myself in the realm of designing designers, designers' minds, and also designing these kind of meta strategies, which I'll talk a little bit about more. And really, in terms of what Integral is about, it's, this one slide shows a kind of like maybe next 20-year vision for Integral. It's around, on the B level, it's this kind of building out Royal Academy of Integral Thinking, as we call it, or the future of education platform. In terms of doing, what we do is individual and group coaching, which includes a startup incubator for blockchain startups, and we sort of do lots of proposition design there, as well as a startup accelerator. And then we have these various design practices, some of which are up and running, and some of which are up and coming. Okay, and underneath that, there are these kind of capabilities technologically that we're constantly building up. So the reason why my talk is called UX design system of systems for designing systems, hopefully it'll become apparent through my presentation. So one of the things, as you saw in the previous slide, there's this idea of be, do, and have. And we've heard in a lot of presentations today around, are you doing things in an agile fashion? Okay, so a lot of the talks are around the doing realm. But really, before really we get to the doing, I'm increasingly finding that the being, okay, is the most important aspect to start from. So when people are talking about the purpose and all these kind of things, that fits into the being realm. And so the idea here of design UX systems of systems for designing systems is that at the B realm of being, we have a system and approach, which you might refer to as a sort of meta strategy. And then there is the doing. And I'm saying here that there is that B is equivalent to a soul of something. Then on the level of doing is the mind, and the level of having is equivalent to a body if we were to equate this to human, being. Remember, we say human beings. Why do we say beings? So if you think I'm the first person, how many of you have heard of the term soul used in user experience design context? Raise your hand. Anybody? Soul? No? Okay. So if you're thinking that I'm crazy, I promise you I'm not, because there is a book out there by a very good friend of mine called Customer Experiences with Soul, A New Era in Design, Simon and Maria Robinson. And they're talking about, and I can recommend this book. I don't usually recommend books, but I'll recommend this one. And it's really taken us to this next level of being, okay, and design, bringing design into that being realm and taking it from the being realm into the doing and having. And so let's talk a little bit about being the soul of design, which you might call the meta design system, okay? Because, let's see. So Alan Watts, which is one of the philosophers out there, you might have heard of him, he says, you feel how you are. The word are here is equivalent to be, okay? So as you are, so you feel. That applies to humans, but then that also applies to products and systems. In fact, my company is called Integral because of integral theory. How many of you have heard of integral theory? One person? Okay. So integral theory is a theory of everything, and it talks about this kind of, what's funny about that?
The theory of everything. It's like, this slide looks like everything.
Yeah, so that's why it's a little bit messy, but in the next one I'll kind of simplify it and focus it on one thing. The core aspect of this is this bit here, which is spiral dynamics, okay, which is evolution of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that spiral dynamics in the sort of simplified format works like this. Firstly, people start with instinctive needs like food, water, warmth, and shelter. Then they rise up in their awareness, in their consciousness. They rise up to magic, which is we, safe mode of living and security. Then there's power, which is I. This is the ego realm, heroic status, power, glory, rage, and revenge. Rule, which is we. Again, this is emergence of nation states and religions and so on, and governments and so on. And even big sort of 9-to-5 corporate environments. Then people rise up to rational superachiever, which is about winning while following rules, whereas sort of ego people might break the rules. And then we go up to sensitive, which is, again, about we. It's kind of people caring a lot more about other people's emotions and empathy and so on. And then people go through like a certain radical phase shift of meaning where they start thinking more integrally on a global level and holistically, which is much more on a cosmocentric level. Unified is like one with everything. If you're there, you are like equivalent of Jesus Christ. So an integral person uses all these levels below to utilize in their everyday life and integrate them into their being, okay? And also applies that across what in the integral theory is this quadrant. So it's I, myself as an individual, we as a community, it as a product, and it's as systems, okay? So products and systems can be at any one of these levels of being. And so then the companies also go through the same stages. This is taken from Norman Nielsen website. The maturity of UX design and design thinking in companies. So they go from there's no UX design, non-existent, nobody cares about it, unrecognized, people know it's there but it's not important, interested, design thinking is important but receives little funding. I plotted some numbers up here to show you that, like, you know, there's kind of like rise in value as you go above, like a phase shift. When people are, when companies are invested, they start kind of hiring wonderful people like yourselves to do UX design and design thinking. And maybe above that, then they start being committed and start bringing in coaches and so on to get more and more engaged, to the point where in a holistic distributed design thinking company, everyone's a designer. Somebody else delivered that talk. Everyone's a designer and they're all contributing to the overall company experience. Creativity doesn't source from need, it sources from wholeness. This is talking about that unified and holistic realm of being. That's where really creativity starts from. And the dividends of this be, do, have approach pay off, because as we fix things up in the be realm, we get sort of tenfold returns in the doing and hundredfold in the having. Let's say notionally, this is not kind of like a scientific talk as such. And also in integral theory, we talk about 3 axes of development, of human development, which is waking up, so becoming aware of what's going on, growing up, which is not the bad term, as like many people talk about, I never want to grow up. Well, it's like this is growing up in terms of being able to handle complexity, okay? And also cleaning up, which is about letting go of various kind of psychosocial traumas from the times past that we all inevitably pick up. So, does anybody know who Mikhail Kalashnikov was? Designed one of the most killing weapons, right? But he said to make something simple is 1,000 times harder than making it complex. So in this being realm, things are very simple. They're in fact unified. But getting there is pretty tricky. And actually, more we work on our own self-development, more we can start thinking about integral strategic approach to our product and service design and UX design, and even designing ourselves and sort of phasing up. So what we talk about a lot now is sort of 5 Ps of strategic approach to designing anything really. So firstly, the planet, then purpose, which we heard a little bit about, people, products, and profit, okay? Many companies at the moment, they'll start kind of, how much profit are we going to make from this? And you just kind of know instinctively that's not going to fly. And through this process of me getting through integral theory and really looking at how to apply it to UX design, because that's kind of what I've spent most of my life doing, we ended up developing a new program called Fresh Mind, which is about helping people realize their perfect life in terms of mentally. So the idea here being that unless you are thinking in a kind of as perfect way as possible, your design and the experiences that you deliver into the company that you're working with, or for yourself for that matter, going back off that Alan Watts quote, you feel as you are, unless you kind of are in touch with that isness, you can't really bring your full and best self, as we call it, perfect self, to the table. So how many of you are familiar with this idea of being? We did a little bit of a meditation earlier on for some of you, but like how many of you are familiar with the idea of being, the state of being? Like just raise your hand. There's like, how many of you have felt the state of being? Or who, like sometimes I ask people, who are you? Like, what would you answer? If I ask you, who are you? What would you say? Gosia. And who are you? Mirek. That's your name. That's not who you are. It's a label that somebody gave you. Okay? So,
like one word, but it has like lots in it.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay. So let's do a quick. So just 3-second exercise. Just you close your eyes. I'm stealing this from KRS-One. So close your eyes. And imagine the word integral, okay? So now you're going to say the word integral without opening your mouth, okay? Just in your mind, you're going to say the word integral. Okay, 1, 2, 3, say the word integral in your mind. You done it? Yeah? Have you heard it? Yeah? So the person that said that and heard that is who you are. Okay? That's your being. That's your soul. Okay? That's your spirit. Okay, so I'm bringing a little bit of spirituality into this because it will become apparent later on, I think, actually, also why it's also relevant to design. So, Brian Stacy said, "You are not what you think you are, but what you think you are." Okay. So I just proved it, that like you're not your name, right? You are what you think. Okay. So let's move on to the doing or the mind. Well, this is like the meta design system. Potatoes just won't do it, as Douglas Adams said. So there's like roughly seven types of thinking that we can use mentally. So like regular thinking is something that you would see from a regular person on the bus stop or something, okay? Then a business person will be like, oh, I can sell some of these clocks for presentations and make loads of money. They're thinking from a profit-driven thing. Scientific thinking is somebody like, really using science to say, hey, this is needed, or I'm looking for new sort of discoveries. Engineering thinking is someone leveraging science to create new things. Systems thinking is someone who's kind of designing systems more on the engineering side. This will work as a machine. Design thinking is something that utilizes empathy before engineering it, okay? And integral thinking is one that utilizes all of these, okay, and says this is all good, okay, because we need to cater to people that are at any level of this and be able to work with them as well. So the more you are integral up there, the more you can comprehend what these other people are thinking like, okay? So to break this science stack up is from the first principles. So instead of working from the top down, from the being into having, we can work from the bottom up in the first principles. So maths is the rawest, purest science, builds up into physics, builds up into chemistry, biology, psychology, philosophy, and we can say design is applied philosophy. So philosophy is very important thing for us to have. And then again, sort of this integral thinking in terms of utilizing all of this. And certainly as UX designers, things need to make, nice. They need to look nice. We're always using things like, nice ratios and so on. Physics, how are things playing out on screen or whatever. Chemistry, the biochemistry of the human experience in biology. What are people actually, how many arms do they have? Who are we catering for? Certainly psychology, a lot of psychological, behavioral psychology, and then philosophy as to what are we thinking this product or service is, and more importantly, company. So a bad workman blames his tools or her tools, Chinese proverb. A lot of the time, I hear designers talking about this tool isn't right fit for the job, this tool isn't right fit for the job. But really what they're complaining about is more of a issue around the company typically not being designed company in this kind of fashion. So to have purpose first, then focus on people. Internally, it's like who is the team, who are the designers, who are the leaders. Externally, who are the customers, target users, etc. Then the systems and processes, how we're doing, what we're doing, what is the innovative edge and how we're innovating on a daily basis. What are our products and services, how that generates money and how much money does it take to do all that stuff, and how does it grow, not growth hack, but grow in a more organic way so that people talk about the products or services or the company as a whole. So what Elon Musk talks about is that we can make dramatic improvements to the machine that makes the machine. And so a lot of the design nowadays is becoming around designing the process for creating things, okay? And the better you make the process, the more you'll be able to create of the end product or service. And so that's why I'm talking about this as a kind of meta design approach, because we first have to, I found myself often in companies, before I do any actual design, I first have to put some sort of process into place, because even if the process was there, it's kind of not really holistic or properly stacked up, okay? And sooner or later, you find out that, so we're like Elon Musk and Tesla are having this problem at the moment where they can't build enough cars because the production plants are not tuned up, okay? They're not designed well enough for the process end-to-end to produce cars. So the cars are moving, it's something like this kind of pace on the production line, okay? And it wants them to move like this fast, okay? And it's taken like 4 years to train all those robots to make it. Hence, the machine that makes the machine needs to be optimized. And then we have the body of the things, and this is actually the design system. So if you're working with the design system, typically, you'll be doing something perhaps like this, where, you know, this is a little bit of the sort of mind and the process of how we do things. This is from a client, Superunion, which is part of WPP, one big marketing agency. So basically their product at the end, their system that they produce, which is the output, the product, is usually corporate websites. And most corporate websites have the typical kind of things on them: about page, news, share feed, etc. So even though this is an agile conference, these guys kind of have to follow a little bit more of a kind of prescribed process, because their clients are saying, we need a new corporate website, we need to know when you're going to finish it, what you're going to deliver, and how much we need to budget for this, and how we can sort of judge you on whether you've delivered good, and so on. So they're constantly having to create corporate websites. So first thing I put into place is a process here, like justify this, and also the design artifacts here as to what's produced. Some of the deliverables here are more on the project management level, some of the activities, and then people. So this thing was supposed to be created into more like a clickable tool to then be able to spec up a corporate client project, and then that goes into design, deliver, and support from first 3 stages of propose, plan, and analyze. And it's loosely based on their overall process that they used throughout 10 years of making corporate websites. And only at the bottom here do we, mention, tools that we use day to day: Sketch, InVision, Photoshop. So whenever someone's saying to me like, oh, I want you to talk more about, do you use Sketch? How do you use Sketch? Do you use this plugin, and so on? I go like, before you get to Sketch, there's all this stuff that you really got to kind of, as a, more senior UX designer, you're gonna have to face. And so what then that created is Sitemap Cards, which are used for rapid and agile kind of speccing out what the scope of the new website for the next corporate client is, which you got sort of defined. And then they create what we call technical templates. So these are all kind of capabilities within the kind of CMS that Superunion has. And then there are content templates that are maybe like instances of technical templates. And they're all very kind of like, the idea here is to pre-build them so that the client can be have their overall website specced up as quickly as possible, and then the developers can know exactly what's in scope and basically just instantiate it like this. And then all that's made out of components, so the kind of atomic design. How many of you have heard of atomic design? Yeah, a few. So that's kind of working from the first principles of buttons, links, text, headings, images, carousels, all these kind of things, atoms and molecules. And that's all the kind of components that make it up, going from styles to elements to components and more components and so on. And they build out these pages and templates, and even can go down to flows and journeys and so on. And then that's all popped into InVision, so even like account managers can muck with that and sort of play around without sort of breaking anything, but also communicating in much more higher fidelity, because we already know what we have as capabilities in Superunion, and then they're defining what this thing is, what it needs to be, okay? And how it works is also already predefined from the ground up. MOJ, Ministry of Justice, this is another program. So in UK, they're actually redesigning the entire judicial system, the entire court system. And so I was brought in as a sort of like a meta strategist, really, because they had these kind of service design teams that were that we're doing service design, but service design is in many cases like visual business analysts, okay? So they do the process, they do the doing, but they forget about the beings, okay, human beings. So I brought in some idea here, or bring in the being, the universal human needs, because the government has, like, the UK government has 62 million people, so the personas there are so varied, okay? So it's like, how can we leverage universal human needs and then plug into that personas and stories and so on? Human-centered design, in other words, first, okay? And then that all builds down into all the kind of design thinking and user testing and all this kind of like, this is really sort of where agile teams would plug in. And that produced actually a set of service experience design best practice cards, so that we could then ensure that each service that's being delivered is actually complying with these best practices across different channels, such as email, live chat, IVR. This is voice record, instant interactive voice recording, SMS, and what's this one? Context. So there's like keeping the context of the service together. So then that would be used for both pre-testing services as well as post-testing services to make sure that they comply with these best practices. Now, Rolly, I played you a little example of Rolly at the beginning, and Rolly is really like one of our darling clients, really. And so here, it was possible because Rolly's CEO, Roland Lamb, who's like one of the most incredible humans I've ever met in my life, is a designer and is a CEO of Rolly. And when we first started working with him, they wanted us to kind of standardize their software design process, okay, bring in basically like a style guide, okay, style guide and some of the kind of atomic design principles. But I said, look, there's a huge scope here to upgrade this to designed companies. So that model that I showed you around purpose, people, systems, innovation, product, funding, and growth was heavily inspired from Rolly. And I said, look, let's just bring in this idea of UX design approach, this kind of the being, okay, and what are our design beliefs and design principles and so on. And you see this like UX maturity model going basically from where Rolly were like interested in UX design. We're looking to bring them up to engaged and totally so distributed. So the next thing was around creating then what we call the people that use Rolly products are creators because they make music. So there's like creator personas and the marketplace distributed around sort of like little, babies that can just kind of bang on the instruments to like professional producers who've been in the game for a long, long time. And also expanding their thinking around the whole entire customer life cycle, around awareness, research, comparison that people do before they actually go into selection, purchase, experience, which is usually with design experiences, but there's a whole thing around designing all this up, all these steps beforehand, and also then getting them to become loyal customers and advocates. So this whole thing then trickled into redesign of Rolly.com, the Noise app, and various kind of architectural bits and bobs. And so this kind of process, which it's like basically user-centered design process, but it's quite interesting to use some more powerful words like saturation. First, you kind of get yourself immersed in what's going on. Then you incubate some ideas. You become sort of more enlightened as to what needs to be done, and then you verify it in the market before you can put it out there. And the design principles are around sort of the being realm, and how are we being towards this product, and that kind of really guides it from top down. And there's really like remembering that the customer is always up on top, but data powers all of that. So there's kind of this unification thing going on around the customer is the most important thing, and the strategy needs to be customer-centric, while data is very important to further empower that. And all these kind of things on the side here are important considerations to make that user experience actually work. So one of the results was that Rolly now have Pharrell Williams as a chief creative officer because he took 5% stake in Rolly as a company. And that's all possible when you apply UX system of systems to design systems. And the outcome, shall we see and hear some of this in action a little bit more? Yeah. All right, cool. So for a second, I thought you were going to say no. This is an example of Pharrell's Happy. Like here, or play an instrument, or trigger off samples, etc. So that's one example. Now, by the way, we actually use the same framework to design all these stories for storytelling, because that was an important aspect of awareness raising for Rolly, and it was integral to Rolly blocks are now sold in Apple stores worldwide. So every Apple store, wherever you go, you will find Rolly outlet inside the store. So that's really it from me. There is a lot to UX design, and we share this all the time. So I'd invite you to join my family, and this is a picture of my family, but there's actually a bigger integral community of design thinkers. So if you go to this, we can join our family of design thinkers of 3,500 people worldwide who are into this kind of stuff. So thank you very much for listening.